Hello, and welcome to the Miguel Sanchez universe, where we help make your ideas reality. So in the past 2 episodes, I've been putting you in a room, in a conference, talking about the future. And today's episode is going to be the last one in the series, where I was put in a room where I could listen to some of the top podcasting advertising networks speak about what they believe podcasts need to do in the future. So I think it's very, very good information for anyone listening to a podcast that may want to be creating their own. And I think it's just excellent information. Stay tuned. Let me know what you think.
Steve said we're allowed to shamelessly promote. So you guys can all go into your podcast app and look up Hustle Sold separately, or follow me on Instagram, HDF Magazine. And I wanted to change podcasting just from what I had seen from some of the other entrepreneurs online. And I wanted to have really real conversations about what's happening in the journey as we're building on something that we believe in, because it's not always easy. And a lot of times you see these platforms in media talk about how awesome and amazing people's end success is. But when we start focusing on what it took to get there, and we start having those very real conversations, the content starts to become very sticky. And I added that to my online content, if you will, and I started driving that all through the influence, and then just started really having a relationship with the audience worldwide. And it was able to grow it into several million downloads, and here we are today, and I'll leave it with that.
My name is Sim, and about 4 years ago, I co-created a show called Unembarrassed Unqualified, and Unqualified became the very first podcast to actually go to terrestrial radio as far as top 40 radio stations with iHeartRadio. And since then, my company, Cloud 10 Media, has been focusing on celebrity-driven podcasts. So and many of them are with Dave right here. I work with Topher Grace on Minor Ventures. Alyssa Milano on a show called Sorry Not Sorry, which we launched about 2 weeks ago, our first episode with Joe Biden. And this year I'll be releasing about 15 shows including talent with Sophia Bush, Kate Hudson, who else? Constance and Missy. It's been a lot of fun. I love this job more than anything. And I also teach a class at USC called Creating the Hit Podcast. And I'm just so excited to be here talking to everyone about podcasts.
Yeah, so as you can see, we have a very diverse group, but we're all very ingrained in the podcasting landscape. So I want to start with, we just saw how many of the audience are listening. We heard and know that over half of Americans are listening to podcasts now. I have reasons why I think so, and I want to, I personally think it's fun, authentic, it's right there. We all have little headsets where we're listening to it every day, but just want to get your guys' perspective.
Yeah.
What you find unique and
Absolutely, I'm happy to start. I think one of my favorite things, which I know we shared in this, is really the diversity of the content and the fact that there's really something for everybody, and there's honestly content that you can't find anywhere else. And a lot of that is because of the nature of podcasting. Podcasting is something that is very accessible to lots of people in terms of content creators. And I've been selling podcasts for over a decade, but before that I had a TV background. I worked the previous decade at Fox, and I can tell you that one of the reasons that podcasting is so successful and the content is so diverse and so well produced is because there isn't a studio system. And I mean that with all due respect to studios, but it's really hard to get projects that should be greenlit. And when you have the ability to produce creative and thoughtful content the way you want to produce it, and you are the owner of that IP and you're able to distribute that in an open fashion to people who are interested, it really opens the floodgates for some of the most amazing audio that's ever been produced in the history of audio production.
Now, you talked about it a little bit. So maybe tell a little more about your story of how you really found your groove in podcasting.
Yeah, I think now having this importance of ownership over your own media, right, everybody can have a voice if they want to, and we can also bring a lot of other voices to that platform. And we can say, anything that we want. It can be more unfiltered. I mean, obviously, we'll think through some of the content, but that ownership is very empowering. And I've had, even when I've had several celebrities on the podcast, and we talked about this previously, is that it gets to be unfiltered for them. They get to have the kind of conversations that they really want, just human conversation. At the core, everybody just wants to relate. And I always say on the podcast that we're trying to humanize everybody's journey, and that makes it much more connected. And when you start hearing somebody doing something that seems so far advanced, but they're actually going through very similar things that you might, suddenly there's a connection, and that content becomes very authentic and sticky. And people feel that. And then you feel like you can do anything as well, too, that you're not alone in that process. And then, and I do like that the idea of ownership over your media. We've moved away from a place where everything was constantly controlled. I realize that world is still trying to control everything, but I urge everybody to build as much of their own distribution as possible for whatever their voice or their brand is. Because when you have that relationship with your audience, like there's nothing else like it.
Fantastic.
I'm going to follow up on that point and say that I love podcasting because of the intimacy that a listener has with the podcast host. And I can tell you firsthand that, I just remember, I remember Bill Simmons is one of my favorite podcasters, and he's a legendary original podcaster. And he lives right down the street from me. I see him around the block sometimes, and I'm so nervous to talk to him because I feel like I know him. I feel like he's my friend. I want to say I'm in the same industry, but I can't. I see this kid all the time, but that's what podcasting does. You feel like you have a best friend, and then that intimacy creates this bond. So when Anna Faris is selling MeUndies, or no, she actually MeUndies droplets. When Anna Faris is selling ZipRecruiter or whatever, people will act on those codes, or they trust them. There is this trust that's created. And you have to believe in the brands as well. You get to be authentic in that sense. But yeah, I love that about podcasting. It works.
That is a perfect segue to advertising, but we'll get back there. We can add something.
No, I was going to add the fact, something that's really interesting about that is that most of the people who are listening to the podcast, there's been some recent national surveys on this, are doing nothing but listening to that podcast. So it is very much foreground. It is very, as Sim said, it's very intimate. Most people are listening on smartphones, that they're listening through some earbud device. So it's very personal, and you do have this very unique relationship. And you're the program director. It's very different than radio, which is typically in the background, and somebody's made a selection for what you're going to listen to. You're selecting what to listen to, downloading it, and then setting aside time to actually experience that. And that develops a very, very different relationship with the host than you have in any other form of media.
Great. And next time you see Bill Simmons, ask why we didn't get the #1 pick to beat the New York Knicks with Zion. We'll have our why didn't the NBA rig the NBA lottery this year? But moving on from that, so you mentioned, Sim, all of these awesome celebrities, and I know some of the other ones that are going to be coming down as well, and you're dealing with these major A-listers. Like, what attracts them into podcasting, and how do they see the medium different than their acting gigs, and like, how do they just view it overall?
Wow. Okay. So that depends. That depends on their approach to podcasting. My approach to podcasting is different from others who are trying to get celebrities into the space. I work more as in development. I come from the film and TV world. So for me, for example, the show that I'm working with Kate Hudson on, which is based on siblings. She's working with it's Kate Hudson and Oliver Hudson, and the show has a focus on siblings. We're developing that show. We're figuring out exactly how we're going to take it to market, and we're doing a bunch of practice shows as well. We started the development process in December, and we're not launching until much later. I think maybe September or whatever it is, and so it's not one of the typical. When you think about podcasting, how it used to be back when you started podcasting, I'm sure some of the comedians that you work with were just pushing record on the Zoom, and then just uploading it onto Libsyn, and then there it goes. There's no real editing at all, except for an intern that they hired to put in the intro and the outro music and whatever ad plays for somebody, right? That's essentially what it was for a very long time.
For a long time.
I don't think that'll work anymore. I think that there are companies that's trying to do that with celebrities, but what happens is when they realize that it's still time, and they're not getting paid well for the time because it's not getting out there properly, and it's not going to make sense for anyone. So when I work with the celebrities I work with, it's not just an extension of their Instagram feed. It's something that we're really going to meaningfully monetize. So it needs to be a proper show. and which means a proper staff that goes into it. So, and I try to make even conversational shows sound unedited and raw, because you want that feeling, of course. But there's a lot of work that goes into every single show to make it sound completely raw and unedited, and what we want, what we all love about podcasting.
And one of those major celebrities that kind of came into the space was Dax Shepard, and was probably one of the biggest successes out of the gate, which from last year. David, I don't know if you can give a little more background on yourself.
I'm happy to. I think that Dax's show is a really, really good example of if you have a great idea and you are a talented host who really cares about the product, you're going to do something phenomenal. And Dax is. We were actually just talking about this yesterday. Dax is the fastest growing show that we've ever seen. It didn't come from a launch platform. So we sold Serial, and Serial is far and away the best true crime show ever. But Serial did have an advantage in that we were able to take a segment from Serial, drop it into This American Life, and launch to that audience. That gave us a springboard to what became successful. Now the audience greatly eclipsed that of This American Life down the road. But really what Dax had is, of course he's a celebrity and he's married to another celebrity, but he had a great idea, a great concept, and he was willing to have a very personal, intimate, candid conversation and show himself as very vulnerable. And that has resonated incredibly well with listeners, and it got to 1 million downloads faster than we've seen any other show do that.
And we talked a little bit about this yesterday. I'm not surprised that vulnerability, that piece that we talked a little bit about authenticity, and the content that I'm noticing, and I think we probably all agree going forward, that interview style is I think it's still there, but I think it's changing. At least I like to think it's changing because the more you're having these authentic, vulnerable, like take the mask off type of conversations. That humanization is exactly why people go, oh, I like that guy. I like that girl. I want to listen more.
That's why Sim thinks he's friends with Bill Simmons.
Right, exactly. That's how we get him to like it.
And even I was on Matt's podcast, also sold separately. Please download it now. Give it 5 stars. And one of my business partners, Kurt Coffer, and Kurt and I loosened up, and ultimately Kurt gave out my email address, and I told everyone that I'd respond within 24 hours. I don't know why I did that, but it just shows that when you're kind of speaking in those terms, like you loosen up and just kind of say what you know is deep down inside, and open up that intimate experience. So, but we have a ton of brands here. We have a bunch of agencies, hopefully partners, not eventual competitors of ours. And just a ton of people are interested in this space. So I want to make sure that we kind of loop the advertising into it. So you mentioned earlier ZipRecruiter and MeUndies, and MeUndies did eventually move away, but we're tracking how do brands in your guys' vision, how should they be thinking about the podcast space and aligning with an individual show or host?
I still don't understand why it's taking this long. It's working. It bothers me that we're obviously you've been getting me the same ads for a long time, and they continue to work. So they're spending a lot of money on my show. So I know that they're working. So why isn't everyone doing this? I don't understand that. It's mind-boggling to me that Squarespace was built off of podcasting, I think.
Yeah, if they just emailed me, I'd get back to them in 24 hours, as we all know now. But yeah.
I mean, sometimes I think that at least from what I noticed when I was working with some of these big brands on brand side, they don't always understand these digital channels.
The numbers, the metrics are something that's a little wonky at this point right now.
And it's hard for them sometimes to believe, you mean just off their personality? You're going to be able to kind of inject our story, our brand in there. And
it works.
And it works. And it throws them off because it's just not maybe more traditional, medium.
Right.
And they don't realize that it is that the host of the show or hosts have this relationship with their audience that's so deeply ingrained that you feel like the friend. And sure enough, they will, whether you advertise or you even just have a person on there talking about their brand that you're aligning with, that conversation, sure enough, I've noticed that my audience they email with you and they'll go buy products of other people who have been on my show just because they know that I really genuinely care about the people and their stories, and when they hear that. But big brands, I think it's
luckily more are getting into the space. They're finally coming around. They're seeing that.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the relationship, that very relationship that's so personal, is why listeners trust the host's voices, and they believe them and they say that they're going to do what that host told them to do.
Yeah.
We did a survey about this. This American Life, Hotels.com was a sponsor, and we did a pre and post survey. It was a very successful campaign. We showed them a 51% brand lift from pre to post, but we left an open field question in the survey, which actually liked even more than the 51%. And what it showed was that we asked them, why did you decide to start using Hotels.com? And we asked them, and we got a response more than a dozen times, which was because Ira Glass told me to. And that's the connection. And that's why, because they trust him, and he told them to do this. And they're like, well, of course, Ira said to do it, so I'm going to do it. It's why Chrysler sponsors Dax Shepard's Armchair Expert. Dax is driving around a Chrysler Pacifica and talking about driving that Pacifica. It's not reading ad copy. It's so much more intimate and personal and a much deeper touch to that. Because what these advertisers are getting are partners in their brand. And it's deeper than ad copy. It's even deeper than a spokesperson relationship. They're ambassadors, and they become part of that brand. And they, Chrysler had such a great experience that they're joining Dax on tour this summer, and as a Midwestern summer tour. The artwork there's actually show art with Dax standing on the hood of a Chrysler Pacifica, which is line drawing, and it's amazing. And they didn't ask for that. That's something that the show did, because they said, we're in this together. And the ability to be in that together with brands and show, wait a second, we're actually going to do this and sell this, and that's what works so well.
Yeah, and I've also noticed that brands, the ones that do embrace it, they're allowing the host more now. Well, they're not fighting the host now more than ever to let the host do it the way that the host does it, and let them be more creative in their delivery of that brand. Because, I've had many influencer friends where the brand would go to them and say, okay, here's how we want you to do it. Like, I can't do that. My allegiance is to the audience, not to you. And if I don't do it that way, it's not going to work. And they're going to be here longer than you are.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really, so the conversations, again, ownership has changed. And so, but just like how Chrysler is allowing him to kind of do his thing.
That's what it comes down
his
to.
personality, right?
And that's where it really works. And we tell advertisers this quite a bit, especially new advertisers, also ones who are more from a traditional media experience using traditional media agencies. We tell them all the time, you have to let the host do their thing. We get people who write this amazing, and it is great, right? They have copywriters spend a ton of time writing great copy for Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan's a professional stand-up comedian. You can't possibly be better than he is. We tell them this all the time, this is great. We're going to knock it down to bullet points. It's going to start off with, hey, fuckers, and he's going to sell a ton of products for you. And that always works, and that's what we tell people all the time. You got to trust him to do what he does and know his audience.
Yeah, authenticity. I mean, if we saw how many podcast listeners are here. If you hear them started reading a scripted piece versus them speaking as they know their audience better than any creative copywriter, creative agency, whatever it is, as long as you give them that freedom and you give them the guide to get there, they can really deliver on that for you. And I think a lot of people approach this, another point that you hit on, a lot of traditional agencies or anyone else kind of in this space is looking at more of a, I want to call it like a digital or traditional medium of a CPM or whatever it may be. But what it really comes down to is, again, that authenticity and the relationships between the host and the brand, and making sure, they're using the product. And I don't know if you can speak to that a little bit about products that you use, love, and then...
Yes, because if Anna is not talking about using that Peloton and her experience, she's not going to sell any Pelotons. And I don't know, did we sell any Pelotons?
Yeah.
So yes, then it needs to be authentic. Otherwise the host right ad is definitely not going to convert on the promo code. It's just not. But to the point of podcast ads at this point right now, for example, when Kate Hudson's show is released and she gets paid millions of dollars in Weight Watchers, for her to do a spot for, for Peloton, let's say, that's a bargain. You're getting her at an absolute bargain. It's a real endorsement. And if she's serious about it, that's why I still understand it's a no-brainer. Podcasting is still a no-brainer. I just remember, and it all started from why I love this industry so much. 2012, 2013, I'm driving home and I'm listening to Howard Stern. Many of you, I'm sure, love Howard Stern like me. Do you like Howard Stern?
I do.
So I get home and he's in the middle of this amazing interview with Lars Ulrich, and I have to stay in my driveway and I can't leave. And And my girlfriend at the time was like, what are you doing in there? Because there was no podcast at the time. There's no podcast app. On-demand audio is a no-brainer. The fact that now, the series has an app, so I guess all Howard Stern has a podcast, even though I know he says he hates them. You can listen to the show in the car, then you can put your AirPods in, walk into your house while you're doing the dishes, and continue to listen to it while you're feeding your baby, while you're walking your dog. And the fact that it's still hundreds of millions of dollars in right now. I know it's continuing to be doubles every year, it seems like. But compared to radio, which is around 15 billion or something like that, we're heading someplace very special with podcasts.
There's no question. Yeah, absolutely. And I think for that Kate Hudson with her brother, I think 23andMe needs to start considering that on their plan right now. But yeah, that's a great point. I mean, a lot of these, and especially with the podcasters you're bringing into the space, if you think about them on traditional influencer channels, I mean, you're paying much, much more for a picture, maybe, instead of having them speak and walk through the experience and really tell that story and let everyone know what that relationship is and then why they should be buying it.
Yes.
So I know we got a little more time. I definitely want to do some Q&A as well.
I'll give you one anecdote just because I have a data, like you, I have a data background. And a lot of what we do is present data to folks. And using a recent survey that we just did to prove out a show to a brand, we did a campaign with Vital Farms eggs. They're a great product. They sponsored Dax Shepard's show. Dax uses their product at home, talked all about that. They ran a fall campaign. They're coming back this year for more based on the success of that. But the interesting thing that we found about that was two things. First thing, for them, we also did a brand study pre and post. They saw a 96% brand lift, which was amazing. People were tweeting to Dax with pictures of them buying Vital Farms eggs at their grocery store. Keeping in mind, too, that Vital Farms eggs are supreme quality, but also have twice the price of regular eggs. So this is quite an accomplishment. But the most interesting part of it was they had to pull the end of their campaign because they sold so many eggs, they ran out of eggs. And I was like, okay, now we're proven. I don't even care what the brand study says at this point. They actually had to shift budget away because they didn't have any more eggs. So I mean, that's a cool story.
That's the key. With all of this and everything that we do with all of our clients, it's really to ultimately drive performance and engagement. So you probably hear a lot of promo codes, URLs. There's also sophisticated ways we work with clients to make sure we're measuring other things on the back end to make sure. Because to that point, not every single person is tweeting it out, but it is fantastic to see.
And these guys have all the metrics, and that's what they provide, and the value proposition they can offer to their clients is they're saying, can we give you as an industry a Nielsen number? And the answer is no. But what these guys can give you is trackability and show and prove out how effective the space really is. And that partnership comes in a variety of different ways. I'm going to talk about one thing that we did together, which was really, really unique. And we partnered with the team at Ad Results on Serial Season 3. And for that, we created with ZipRecruiter, who was the sponsor, and they bought an exclusive presenting sponsorship of that show. So every single download, every single person who listened to any episode of the third season of Serial would receive a ZipRecruiter ad. But I think the stickiest part about that was we produced with ZipRecruiter and Ad Results these very thoughtful, custom-created mid-roll vignettes that were produced by the show and married to the brand, and were really, really sticky, and they told a story. And people were, we teased the story at the top of the show, and then have the mid-roll that would tell you what happened within that story. And it was really, really effective. And that was, I think, a great marriage between the show and the brand as well.
And one last thing before we do go to Q&A. I think the marriage between any brand and podcaster needs to be there. And everything we do, we want to make sure that Sim is telling us, or David or Matt, whoever it is telling us, yes, we do want to try this product. Yes, this is a much better product. We can speak to why it's so much better. And then once we know that's there, then we can kick and launch a campaign. But we want to make sure that's all there before we really get kicked off, because we want to make sure all parties are aligned, because ultimately the key thing here is it's a partnership between everybody. So I know we have a few microphones. I want to make sure we have time for Q&A. So raise your hand if you have a question, and someone will come over to you.
Are there directories or anything that show almost like rate sheets? When I've advertised on podcasts in the past, it's been contact one at a time? Is there some resource that shows many at once?
The answer is no. And the reason for that, it's good and it's bad. The reason for that is because of the true grassroots and authentic independent producer nature of podcasting. Independent producers typically are the ones who either sell or contract a company like ours to sell for them. So as a result, there is a little bit more detective work that sometimes buyers have to do. But I can say this, it is a very collaborative space. These companies get together, all of us and our competitors who either distribute and produce and sell shows get together and we will refer business together, we hold events together. We did the very first West Coast podcast out front in LA in the fall, and that was 6 competing companies who got together and invited advertisers and agencies to come under one roof and actually present together. So it is a very collaborative group. So the answer is that doesn't exist. Will it one day? I'd love for it to. We're still very much even over a decade in an emerging industry. But as a result of that, we do really collaborate because all of us who are in this for the long haul want to see the business and industry community grow.
And you also teed it up perfectly. That's exactly what we do. We pull together all the fragmentation so that we can utilize data to develop the best plan possible.
They set that up.
So you can call Steve or email him. Get back to you right away.
Hi. I was wondering when you are testing to see if a new podcast is going to work for you, what is the minimum amount of episodes that you should test?
That's a really good question. I think that if you're not seeing growth, even if it's incremental growth every week, I think it's time to maybe decide if you want to just do it as a hobby. And again, most podcasts, I think 99.9% of podcasts do not make any money. So I don't know what those numbers are. It's a very small percentage that make money. So, but then again, there are small podcasts that are niche podcasts that drive higher CPMs, right? And you can make money off of that. But then again, there are how many podcasts now? 700,000?
There's I think over 1 million.
Over 1 million?
We probably And answering the question from the advertiser side, there's probably about 6,000 podcasts we're advertising on where it has enough scale. If the question is how many reads you need until you know if it's working and kind of build from there, there was a recent study where you need just under about 2 reads. From our data, I would say 2 or 3 reads. Because the first one, while you might see a pop out of the gate, it's still getting, it's kind of that introduction point, and really that second spot or that third spot is where we see kind of the lift really kick in, and the consumer has heard it multiple times. They know that the hosts are behind it.
Oh, I thought the question was how many
It's
podcasts.
both. I think it's actually both. I think it's good for both ends.
Yeah, no, it's no different than any other form of media we need frequency. In any advertising, you can't just buy one ad, one billboard, one TV spot, Yeah.
I would give it 2 months. If you really are serious about it, try it for 2 months. And if you're still enjoying it, continue. And if the podcast is growing, great, and keep doing it. And if you're not having any fun, then stop.
Perfect. Both sides.
Hi, I was wondering what makes for a successful podcast? Netflix has their formula for film. What's the secret sauce for a podcast?
Oof, want to kick that one off?
What's the secret sauce for anything that's great? What content, right? How do you create good content? It's really hard. There's no secret sauce for me either. I've released shows with talent that I thought would succeed and they haven't. And they have millions and millions of social followers, and yet they can't download, more than enough to monetize. So the secret sauce is the show needs to be great, and I don't know how to tell you how to create a great show. That's on you.
The largest shows today, I would have never guessed it if someone put it in front of me. And what the probably next 10 largest shows, I probably wouldn't guess what most of those are either. So it's just
And it varies greatly too. There are some new shows that launch and they fill a void in a genre that didn't exist before. But then there are people who launch a show in a genre that did exist before and it's incredibly well. There are the people that Sim mentioned, some people who just basically hit record and then when they're done, they post the show. And then there are people like Ira Glass who sits on every single edit session for every single second of audio that's in every episode of This American Life and Serial. So there are different levels and they're all, it can all play well in the space together too.
I'd like to take a stab at that. The secret sauce is you. If you really outside of true, like the big influential people, like the secret sauce is you. Like, what do you really like? What do you really want to be talking about? And what do you really want to be connecting about with it? I think it was not Simon Sinek, but there was another gentleman that was talking about you don't have to be popular in the full world. You have to be popular in the world that knows you or your niche or what you are doing.
That makes sense.
So the problem I have found with influence online and all that crap is that like you're seeing all this like you need millions and millions of this, millions and millions of that. You don't, and a lot of it's also bought. But like if you really want to just do whatever your thing, it just feels good. There's I mean, you're gonna say no to 100,000 of like 7 billion plus people. You're not. And the other thing too is that if you really are direct with them, I mean, having a very tight relationship with them, you actually can reach out directly. I DM every single person and like, hey, do you mind giving me a rating review? Hey, do you mind telling me what you like about the podcast? See, I build one by one, but my thousands turn into 10,000s, turn into hundreds of thousands. And so, because I genuinely like what I do and care about the people I do it for, so I have to come from a different angle. I have to actually grow it like from who is this guy? You know? And I love it. Like, so the secret sauce is just really feeling what I'm doing and really being present with the people that are on the show. So if you love it and it like sends you out and you feel good, then just do it. Whether it goes anywhere or not, you'll find though that it actually starts going somewhere once it hits. Like you'll find several people that just really dig your angle on something, right? That's all you need. So,
and I do think there is a combination of authenticity, timing, what the subject is, who it is, you know, how good they are, who their interviewees are. Like, so all of those things are components that you need, and like putting all the time in. Like, you know, Sim at the real beginning talked about the countless hours he puts in to make sure it sounds as seamless as possible. Like all that hard work is what's ultimately going to get you there, to give you that opportunity, and some will pop and some won't pop. Next question.
So for all the viewers, how do you know the demographics, age, time listening? Do you guys have any of those stats? And how do you
A lot of them, yes.
We have
It's
a lot.
getting better.
It's definitely getting better. It depends on where that listening is taking place. Some of it we can get from in-app listening if you have an app, or a platform listening if you're on a specific platform. Others of it we get from some of the surveys that I mentioned. You know, we've done surveys with This American Life that have returned 50,000 respondents. That's bigger than any Nielsen study would be. So we do have, you know, and that's because I was told them to take a survey. And so we do have access to it. You know, if there isn't one universal measurement service, and there really candidly isn't likely to be, because this is an open platform. Also because there are a number of privacy policies in place that a lot of us as consumers we do want. So you know, there's a little bit of a yin and yang there, but we have enough. You know, we know who people are and what they're doing and what their habits are, so we can see demographically and certain sociographic stuff. And then a lot of the measurement platforms and the hosting platforms are getting much better about delivering a lot of that data to us. So some of it, you know, I think years ago was anecdotal, and now it's becoming actual real measurement against a significant and meaningful sample size to it.
And to that point, on the agency and client side, like what we'll do is, to David's point, like we'll have survey data, and we'll talk, we'll try to get a feel for what all of that looks like, and ultimately on the client side, we're seeing who's actually making the purchases or registering, and so forth, and making sure that we kind of can understand how that data all looks and compares against each other, and really build from there. So it is kind of you have to take a little bit of a leap of faith and have a little trust, but once to the point of pretty much anyone that does come into the podcast space, if they can measure it analytically, ultimately you'll see them expand from there.
you know, and you can hack into it too. So I'll use survey is huge through email, and then I use Instagram stories, and I poll. Like that polling feature, by the way, is like lethal, because the moment somebody answers, you have a connection with them immediately. So whatever brand you have, whatever you're building, that's just a rant on itself. We can talk about that later, but you can literally then open up the conversation. So if I get like a few hundred people, when I say like, "What do you think of this episode?" or "Did you download? Are you currently listening?" and if they're saying yes, I hit each of them up. I actually look at each of their accounts. I'm that invested in it. I don't know how I have that time. And then I actually take down all that data on them. I'll go to their accounts, and then I might just do follow-up questions. Again, like, I know where I want to take the show because I want that full ownership, but I want to know the demographics at that standpoint. I want to know country, I want to know age, I want to know, gender, I want to know interest if I can. So I use polling like crazy in the stories, and I mean, getting hundreds at a time is pretty helpful if you're doing it so many times a month.
And I know that if you're a verified Instagram account, then you can get all sorts of great insights and data and everything. I mean, I use a lot of that to give you for a lot of my shows as well.
Any questions? Yeah. All right, boys. Oh, one more. Or do we have to wrap up?
We have to wrap up. These guys are sticking around though, right?
We're sticking around, so the last thought here is, I know we're talking about plywood tomorrow and how big podcasting has become, and everyone asks me if they're too late, and I really believe that we're just at the beginning. So to the point of podcast, where it is and where it compares to radio, we're at the beginning now, so I would say get in and learn while you can and expand from there. But we'll be around, so come find any of us, and we'll be happy to chat podcasting all day. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Miguel Sanchez Universe. Hopefully that was helpful. And please share and subscribe to the podcast. And hope to see you back next time. Thank you.